Hello and welcome to Observer Research Foundation. We are here today to discuss India's airstrike across the line of control in retaliation to the Pulwana suicide terror attack. With me is our Pakistan expert Sushant Sareen, who's a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. So first of all, a very simple question. What does India's airstrike mean? What does it mean for the subconventional and the asymmetrical warfare that we are seeing from Pakistan?
I think it seems to suggest a paradigm shift in how India was going to approach this whole issue of proxy warfare or subconventional warfare from the Pakistani side. For the last 30-40 years, India has been reluctant to hit back in a conventional manner, use its conventional superiority to counter the subconventional warfare that Pakistan has been imposing on India. But now I think the patience has started running out. So the first indications came in 2016 when we went in for the surgical strikes, and then yesterday when we took the next step on the escalation ladder and carried out airstrikes not just across LOC but into Pakistan. So clearly I think the signaling is that this is an India which is not going to take things lying down. It doesn't want an escalation, but it also will not allow the export of terrorism into India with impunity. So I think that was probably the message that went.
Yesterday, after the airstrikes, there were some harsh statements that came from Pakistan. They said that they're going to respond. And today, there have been various events since morning. How do you see these events that have been playing out since early morning? There have been various claims from the Pakistani side. So far, I don't believe there's been a confirmation to what the Pakistanis are claiming. But whatever it is, it does seem like they're kind of showing their intention, and there is also possibility of some kind of an action that they have taken. What does it mean here on? What does it mean to the escalation ladder? How far do you think this is going to escalate?
So see, here was after the Indian airstrikes yesterday, the Pakistanis were caught between a rock and a hard place. Part of the problem for them was that the kind of image that the armed forces in Pakistan had built for themselves. Part of the problem was that that entire doctrine under which they thought they could export terrorism with impunity into India, I think that came into question. And part of the problem was that if India had rubbed some of the red lines, where does it leave the Pakistanis from here on? Then there were issues for the Pakistan army because both in after the Kargil war as well as after the Abbottabad operation which was carried out by the Americans, the then army chiefs, General Musharraf after Kargil and Kiani after Abbottabad, had to literally go around garrison towns, convince the soldiery that all was well, that things were not as bad, because there was a lot of anger within the soldiery on the way the Pakistanis had been worsted in Kargil and the way they had been caught napping after Abbottabad. So I think there was going to be a lot of pressure in the armed forces. There was going to be a lot of pressure on Imran Khan, who had done some grandstanding before the airstrikes had happened. So clearly, I think there would have been a compulsion for the Pakistanis to do something. Now, one choice before them was to pretend as though nothing had happened and just let it lie low after creating a bit of a fuss. But the second option was that do something, go up the escalation ladder a little bit and see how the other side responds. I think they chose the latter. They went up the escalation ladder both to assuage public sentiment, the sentiment within the armed forces, and to make a show of force to India. Now clearly we are up the escalation ladder. So now I would imagine that the Indian side would have certainly factored this in, and some of the steps, which again these are unconfirmed reports of airspace being closed down virtually over all of North India, or at least above Punjab and in Jammu and Kashmir, and all of these measures which have started being taken seem to suggest that India is not quite ready to back down just yet. The Pakistani calculation would also be that if they go up the escalation ladder, number one, they try and reassert the red lines which they had established earlier. Number two, they try and agitate the international opinion to come in and step in on the conflict. So clearly the Pakistanis don't expect to go very much high up the escalation ladder, and they think that after a couple of steps, there will be a lot of pressure and both sides will be pulled apart rather than being forced into a confrontation. Now, these are assumptions, and very often in the kind of dynamic situations we are in, and given the kind of compulsions which operate on either side, both in India as well as in Pakistan, some of these assumptions might not hold. So then you enter into some seriously dangerous territory.
What next? Because right now, I believe everyone in the establishment in New Delhi must be thinking what should be the next option, and must also be thinking that how far can you escalate it? What do you think is going to happen? Because we don't have a clarity on what's going to happen, and I believe that there will be discussions happening right now.
So, Khalid, see, here's the thing. We are in the fog of war right now. We don't have very clear-cut information of what exactly is happening. Much of the information which is coming out is unconfirmed reports, number one. Number two, this is a very dynamic situation. Events are moving at a very fast pace. So, clearly, it is difficult to say what the next steps are going to be. I would imagine that people in the government in India at least would have at least gamed some of these scenarios. They would have worked out of what their fallback positions, what their options would be in case the Pakistanis went up the escalation ladder. They would have worked out what are the various kinds of things that the Pakistanis can do. But clearly, the fact that the Pakistanis have tried to escalate both by use of air power as well as along the line of control. Line of control is pretty much normal. There is nothing really abnormal of what is happening out there. But the use of air power means that the Pakistanis have gone up the escalation ladder. Now, it will be incumbent on the government, given their compulsions, on how they react. Now, do they try and cool things down out here? In which case, there is the hazard that the kind of signaling which they did yesterday, they might be seen to be backing down from it. On the other hand, if they go up the escalation ladder, then surely they would have to think the next 2 or 3 steps ahead on how this is going to unfold.
Do you also think right now that Pakistan is also trying to get in the nuclear blackmail into the picture? Because we saw the kind of noises that came from Pakistan yesterday. It did certainly, they were trying to signal that they're going for a nuclear blackmail. What do you think of that?
No, I think they were trying to use 2 kinds of blackmails. One is on the Afghan peace process, and they've come out very clearly and said that this is going to jeopardize the Afghan peace process. And the second was the nuclear saber rattling. I think that would have certainly been factored in. What the Pakistanis would try to do is certainly wave this threat, scare the rest of the world to come in, so that that escalation ladder, even they don't want to go down that road, but they want to wave the threat so that the rest of the world comes in, stops this escalation at a certain level, and then pulls apart the 2 sides. Now, again, like I said, all of these are based on certain assumptions. What if the rest of the world doesn't come in? What if India does not back down? So there are a lot of what ifs as of now, as we speak. But clearly, they are trying to re-establish the kind of deterrence which they thought existed because of the nuclear umbrella under which they were operating, and which they thought gave them impunity to continue the relentless export of terrorism into India. Those assumptions have been questioned by India yesterday. The Pakistanis have tried to re-establish those lines today. So now, in the sense, there is a challenge for the government out here to say whether they will certainly back down right now, or they will go further up, or they will keep the tensions pretty much alive so that the Pakistanis don't think that they can get away with it.
Which means that whatever is being done today by the government of India or even the government of Pakistan will be decisive of how we will perceive deterrence in the future, how we will perceive asymmetrical warfare and the retaliation to that in future. The nature of asymmetrical warfare is also that it keeps changing very fast and very dynamic, and there are no set rules for such a situation. What do you think, your 2 bits of advice for the government of India?
I am no one to advise the government of India, but my 2 bits is that we are in completely uncharted territory right now. People have tried to game these things, but no game can work out all the possibilities and how events will actually unfold on the ground. So the thing is that we are in a time frame where like I said, we don't know how what tomorrow will bring. We can only make some educated guesses on what kind of reactions might come. But like I said, those are just guesses at the end of the day. What kind of calculations would be operating on the people who have to take those policy choices? And these are very hard, tough policy choices. Mr. Modi did take a risk by ordering the airstrikes. He is known as a risk taker. The point is, how much more risk is he ready to take? War is not something which anybody talks about lightly, but the risk taking ability of Mr. Modi is one of the X factors which could pretty much alter all the equations right now.
One last question. How do you see the international reactions to the airstrikes and the events that have been unfolding since yesterday? Because a lot of countries have come out and made very clear statements. A lot of them have been silent. I don't know if there has been a reaction from USA so far, but how do you see the various international reactions that have come forward so far? How do you read them?
See, I think some of the reactions have been heavily loaded in India's favor. They've been asking Pakistan to back down. They've been asking them to, drain the swarms of terror that exist in that country, and they've asked them to take meaningful action against the terrorist groups. At the same time, I think there is no country in the world which has not been advocating or not been advising maximum restraint on both sides. So I think that is one set of reactions. I think we still haven't seen the kind of intervention which we have seen in the past. And one reason, possibly, again, this is pure speculation, could be that, okay, fine, let them go up a couple of steps up the escalation ladder. If the Indians feel so strongly about them, let them take a few more steps. But we'll step in when we think things are actually going out of control. So maybe they will not step in immediately, maybe they will. But like I said, again, it's uncharted territory even for the international community, because I don't think there was any other comparable situation in the last 50 odd years, whether it was Kargil, whether it was the 2008 Mumbai attacks, whether it was the parliament attacks. I don't think there has been any comparable situation in the past. So in that sense, we are in a completely new situation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us for this conversation.